stood at the entrance of Nexus 7 and felt small. The massive space station stretched in every direction, its walls gleaming with alien metals he didn't recognize. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved past him without a glance. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some floated. One creature looked like living crystal, its body reflecting light in rainbow patterns. Nobody stopped to welcome him. He carried a single bag with his belongings and a data pad with his assignment. Cargo Specialist Level 3, the lowest rank available. He'd been a logistics officer in Earth's military, but that meant nothing here. Humanity had just received permission to join the galactic community 3 months ago. They were the new species, the unknown ones. Followed the signs to the administrative office, walking for nearly 20 minutes through corridors that seemed designed for beings much larger than him. Everything felt too big, too bright, too strange. The administrative office was chaos. Dozens of aliens stood in lines, speaking languages that hurt his ears. His translator implant struggled to keep up. He waited for 2 hours before reaching the front desk. A tall crystalline being stood behind the counter. Its body was transparent, with lights pulsing inside like a living computer. This was one of the dominant species on the station, had studied them during his journey. Name and purpose, the said without looking at him. Human, I'm here for my cargo specialist assignment. The finally looked down. Its faceted eyes studied him for a moment and saw something he would become very familiar with over the next weeks. Dismissal. Complete, total dismissal. Human, the repeated as if tasting the word. Yes, you're the second one, small species, no natural advantages, weak gravitational origin. It tapped on a holographic screen. You'll work Bay 17 night cycles. Supervisor will assign your duties. Quarters are in Section L, Level 9. Welcome to Nexus 7. They handed him a key card and immediately called for the next person in line. Was forgotten before he even left the counter. His quarters were tiny, a room barely large enough for a bed and a small desk. The bed was designed for a species with a different body shape, making it uncomfortable. The air recycling system made a strange whining sound. Through his single window, he could see the cargo bays far below and the stars beyond. Unpacked his few belongings and tried to contact the only other human on the station. Worked in the communications sector, somewhere in the upper levels. But her schedule was different from his, and messages had to go through station systems that were slow and often glitchy for human tech. His first shift started at what the station called night cycle, though in space, day and night were just arbitrary measures. He reported to Cargo Bay 17 and met his supervisor. Was a species with 4 arms and thick, armored skin. He stood nearly 8 feet tall. When he saw, he made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. They sent me a human. What am I supposed to do with you? You can't lift heavy cargo. You can't survive in the cold storage units. You can't even reach the upper racks. Crossed all 4 arms. Just stay out of the way and scan inventory. Think you can manage that? Yes, sir, said quietly. Don't call me sir. I'm not your military superior. This is civilian work, human. Try to remember that. The work was mind-numbing. Spent his shifts scanning cargo containers, updating databases, and watching other species do the actual heavy lifting. They had mechanical loaders, but most species preferred to show off their natural strength. The workers could lift containers that weighed several tons. They could climb the walls and ceiling to reach impossible spots. Even the smaller species had advantages. Better speed, better senses, better something. Was just there, background noise. But he watched. It was something he'd learned in the military. When you're new, when you're uncertain, watch everything. Learn the patterns, understand the flow. He noticed which ships came regularly and which were unusual. He saw which workers were friendly with each other and which avoided contact. He observed the small details that everyone else ignored. After 2 weeks, he noticed something odd. A ship called the Meridian came every 5 days. Its cargo manifest listed standard trade goods, metals, fabrics, food supplies. But the weight distribution was wrong. Had spent years in logistics. He knew how cargo sat in a ship's hold. The Meridian was carrying something much heavier than its manifest claimed. He mentioned it during a shift change. "Supervisor, I think there's an error in the Meridian's cargo manifest." Didn't even look up from his data pad. "The Meridian is cleared, regular shipper, no problems. But the weight distribution doesn't match." Human finally looked at him. "You've been here 2 weeks. You don't understand our systems. The Meridian is fine. Stop wasting my time." Tried to drop it, but he couldn't. His mind kept returning to the problem. A few days later, he noticed crew members from various ships entering the station but never leaving. Their names appeared on arrival manifests but not departure ones. He started keeping his own records, noting irregularities that others dismissed. A shipment that arrived damaged but was logged as intact. A storage unit that was marked as empty but showed heat signatures. Small things, details. When he tried to report these observations, he was met with the same response everywhere. The security office told him he didn't understand station procedures. His supervisor told him to focus on his own duties. Even other cargo workers from different species made it clear that a human had no business questioning how things were done. The administrator who had first processed him actually laughed when requested a meeting to discuss his concerns. "Little human, you've been here less than a month. We've been running this station for decades. I think we know what we're doing. Perhaps you should spend less time worrying about things you don't understand and more time learning your place." Left that meeting feeling a familiar emotion. It was the same feeling he'd had as a young soldier when officers ignored his warnings about supply line vulnerabilities. Those officers had learned too late that being low rank didn't mean being wrong. He returned to his quarters that night and sat by his small window. The stars looked the same as they did from Earth, just from a different angle. Down in the cargo bays, ships came and went, carrying their secrets. Was ignored, dismissed, considered irrelevant by every species on the station. They would learn their mistake. He opened his personal computer and started a new file. He began documenting everything he'd noticed, every irregularity, every pattern. If nobody would listen, he would gather proof they couldn't ignore. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover something far worse than cargo manifest errors. And he was about to remind the galaxy of something they'd forgotten. Humans didn't get strong by being the biggest or the fastest. They got strong by being the most persistent. And once a human started hunting, they didn't stop until they caught their prey. 6 weeks into his assignment, suspicions had grown into certainty. Something criminal was happening on Nexus 7, and it involved people in power. He had pages of documented irregularities, but no proof of what they meant. That changed on a cold night cycle in the lower cargo bay. Had been assigned to inventory an isolated section that was rarely used. Most workers avoided it because the environmental controls were faulty, making it uncomfortably cold even for species adapted to harsh conditions. 4. It was just another reminder that human comfort ranked low on the station's priorities. He was scanning containers in the dim light when he heard voices. They came from behind a stack of large cargo modules, speaking in a language his translator identified as, recognized one voice immediately. Something told him to be quiet. He ducked behind a container and activated his scanner's recording function. It was against station rules to record without permission, but had stopped caring about minor rules. "The next shipment arrives in 3 cycles," was saying. 12 units, high quality. The buyers are already waiting. "What about security?" a second voice asked. "Handled, Chief is one of us. He'll make sure the scanning is superficial, just like always. And if anyone notices." Laughed, "Who's going to notice? The workers are idiots. They scan what we tell them to scan. They see what we tell them to see." His heart pounded. Units. They were talking about something being shipped in units, and the security chief was involved. "What about the storage?" the second voice asked. "Bay 22, lowest level. The cooling units mask the biosignatures. We'll move them out within 12 hours of arrival. Fast and clean." Biosignatures. His blood went cold. They weren't talking about cargo. They were talking about living beings. He stayed hidden for another 20 minutes, recording everything. The conversation revealed fragments of a larger operation. Multiple ships, multiple buyers, payments being funneled through fake trade accounts, and names. Several station officials were part of this network. When the voices finally faded and he was sure they were gone, carefully made his way back to the main bay. His hands were shaking. He'd stumbled onto something massive, and he had no idea what to do with it. 3 days later, he found out exactly what kind of units were being trafficked. He was running a late inventory check when he heard a sound that didn't belong in a cargo bay. It was soft, almost musical. Crying. Someone was crying. Followed the sound to a damaged container in a restricted section. The container's seal was broken, probably from rough handling. Through the crack, he could see movement. "Hello," he called softly. "Is someone in there?" The crying stopped. After a long moment, a small voice answered, "Please help, please." Looked around. No cameras in this section, one of the reasons it was used for illegal activities. He grabbed a pry bar and worked at the container's door. It took several minutes, but he finally got it open. Inside were 4 beings unlike any he'd seen on the station. They were small, barely 3 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large, luminous eyes. They looked fragile, like they might break from a harsh word. The translator identified their species. He remembered reading about them. A peaceful species from the outer rim. They had no weapons, no military, no defenses. "Are you hurt?" asked. The eldest of the 4 stepped forward. "You're not one of them. You're different." "I'm human. My name is What happened to you?" The story poured out. They'd been taken from their colony world 6 weeks ago, promised work and education on the core worlds. Instead, they'd been sold. The container was supposed to be transferred to another ship, but something had delayed it. They'd been in there for 2 days with minimal food and water. "There are others," they said. "Many others. They take us because we're small, easy to transport. We fetch high prices as servants." Slavery. Felt sick. This was a trafficking ring, moving sentient beings through Nexus 7 like they were products. He gave them his water and some food bars from his pack. "I'm going to get you out of here, but I need to be smart about it. If they know I found you, they'll kill us all." He sealed the container loosely so they had air, marked it with a fake damage code that would keep other workers away, and promised to return. Then he went straight to station security. Chief was alike. His office was cold and impersonal. He listened to his report with what seemed like professional attention. "These are serious accusations," said when finished. "Do you have evidence?" Showed him the recordings, the cargo manifest irregularities, everything he documented. Reviewed it all carefully. "I see," he said finally. "This is very concerning. I'll need to investigate this thoroughly. Where did you say you found these?" Something in his tone made hesitate. A warning voice in his head told him he'd made a mistake. "I need to verify the location in my notes. I can send it to you later." "That won't be necessary. You'll show me now." It wasn't a request. It was an order, and understood with sudden, terrible clarity that wasn't going to investigate anything. He was part of it. "Actually, I think I was mistaken," said, standing up. "The container was probably just." Moved faster than expected. He grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Sit down, human. We're not done talking." His military training kicked in. He twisted out of his grip and ran. Behind him, he heard shouting into his communicator. knew the lower levels better than anyone now. He'd spent weeks wandering them during his shifts. He dodged through maintenance corridors and service tunnels, finally losing his pursuers in the environmental systems sector. He made it back to the damaged container and helped the out. "We need to move, now." He led them through passages most people didn't know existed, finally reaching an abandoned storage area in the deepest part of the station. It was cold and dusty, but it was safe. For now. "You should have left us," the eldest said. "Now they'll kill you too." Maybe said, "But I'm harder to kill than I look." He tried to contact, but his communicator access had been restricted. They'd locked him out of station systems. He was being hunted by security, his supervisor was a criminal, and the station administrator was probably involved too. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt something else. Anger, cold, focused anger. Had been ignored and dismissed since arriving on Nexus 7. They'd treated him like he was nothing, like he couldn't understand their complex systems, like he was too weak, too small, too human to matter. They were about to learn how wrong they were. He looked at the four who were watching him with fear and hope mixed together. How many others are there? How many are still trapped? "Dozens," they said. "Maybe hundreds. They move us through several stations." Nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind. A dangerous, probably impossible plan, but it was better than hiding. "Then we're going to free them," he said. "All of them." "How? You're one person. They're an entire organization." Smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "They keep saying humans are weak, small, no natural advantages. They're right about one thing: we don't have claws or armor or super strength, but we have something better." "What's that?" "We never stop. Once a human starts hunting, they don't quit. They don't give up. Our ancestors tracked prey for days across entire continents. They outlasted everything bigger and stronger than them." He pulled up his data files and began reviewing everything he knew about the trafficking operation. Names, schedules, locations, weaknesses. "They made me invisible," he said quietly. "They ignore me. Now I'm going to use that. I'm going to hunt them the way my ancestors hunted on Earth, and they won't see me coming." They looked at him with something that might have been hope, or maybe pity. They didn't know humans well enough to understand. But they would learn, and so would everyone else on Nexus 7. The hunt was beginning. For 3 days didn't exist. At least that's what everyone on Nexus 7 believed. Security was looking for him, but they were searching for someone trying to hide. They didn't understand that wasn't hiding. He was hunting. The abandoned storage area became his base. He moved the four to a safer location, an old emergency shelter that still had working life support. Then he began his work. The station's maintenance tunnels were his territory now. They ran behind every wall, under every floor, connecting every section. Most species found them too cramped, too uncomfortable. For a human, they were perfect. Could move anywhere on the station without being seen. He started by watching. He followed for an entire day cycle, learning his routine, nodding everyone he met. He observed the security patrols and found their patterns. He mapped out the entire trafficking operation piece by piece. On the 4th day, he made his first move. Named was a mid-level operator in the trafficking ring. He handled payments and kept the financial records. Had watched him for 2 days and learned everything about him. Liked to drink at a bar in the commercial sector. He bragged about his wealth, and he kept all his data on a personal device he carried everywhere. Waited until was drunk and stumbling back to his quarters. The corridor was empty, had checked the camera schedules and knew this section had a 30-second gap in coverage every few minutes. When passed through that gap, struck. He didn't attack directly. That would have been stupid. Instead, he had prepared a small device, something he'd built from spare parts in the maintenance sector. It generated a localized electromagnetic pulse. When walked past, triggered it. His communicator, his personal device, Even his security access card all died instantly. Cursed and stumbled. While he was distracted, slipped past him and placed a data chip on the corridor floor, making it look like had dropped it. "Sir, you dropped something," said, stepping out of the shadows. Turned, squinting at him. "Who are you?" "Maintenance worker, you dropped this," held up the data chip. Snatched it from him without a word and stumbled away. He didn't recognize, just another insignificant worker, another piece of background. What didn't know was that the chip contained a virus, a very specific virus that had spent 2 days coding. The next time connected his device to the station network, the virus would spread, and it would do 2 things. It would copy all of his files and send them to a secure location, and it would make small changes to the financial records, changes that would make it look like was stealing from his own organization. 3 days later was found dead in his quarters. His partners had discovered the theft and handled it themselves, felt no guilt, had been selling sentient beings. Whatever happened to him, he deserved. But more importantly, now had access to the entire financial network. He knew who was being paid, where the money went, and who the buyers were. He everything and began preparing his next move. He also found something else in those files. The name of someone who had tried to resist. An engineer named Prism had refused to modify the scanning equipment to help hide the trafficking. Prism had been fired, blacklisted, and was now living in the lower levels, doing odd jobs to survive. Found him working in a small repair shop. Prism looked up when entered, his crystalline body dim with exhaustion. "I need help," said directly. "I'm fighting the trafficking ring. I need someone who understands station systems." Prism stared at him for a long moment. "You're the human they're looking for, the one who found the—" "Yes." "They'll kill you. They'll kill anyone who helps you." "Probably, but I'm going to stop them first, with or without help." Prism was quiet for a long time, then his body brightened slightly. "I lost my position because I wouldn't help them. My family disowned me. I have nothing left to lose. What do you need?" "I need to access the communication systems. Can you help me reach the upper levels?" "I know a way." That night, Prism led through a service passage that connected to the communications sector. It was a dangerous route, passing through several areas with active security. But Prism knew exactly when the patrols changed and where the blind spots were. They reached an access panel near the communications center. Prism opened it with his engineering codes and slipped inside. He moved through the narrow spaces until he found what he was looking for, a terminal with access to external communications. He sent a message to, just 3 words, "Bay 22, trust me." Then he began downloading files, everything he'd gathered, every piece of evidence. He uploaded it all to a secure server and sent a copy to an address would check. If something happened to him, the truth would still get out. He made it back to Prism without being detected. The looked impressed. "For someone small, you move well." "Humans evolved sneaking up on prey," said. "We're good at not being seen." "I'm beginning to understand why they're afraid of you." "They're not afraid yet, but they will be." His next target was the shipping schedules. With Prism's help, he accessed the cargo management system and made subtle changes. A shipment that was supposed to go to one buyer got redirected to another. Delivery times were altered. Coded messages were scrambled. Within a week, the trafficking network was in chaos. Shipments were arriving at the wrong places. Buyers were angry. Money wasn't flowing correctly. The organization started to fracture as everyone suspected everyone else of incompetence or betrayal. Through it all, remained invisible. He struck and disappeared. He sabotaged and vanished. He created confusion and doubt without ever being seen. But he knew it couldn't last. Eventually, they would realize that all these problems started with one person, the human they dismissed and ignored. That moment came sooner than expected. Was in the maintenance tunnels when he heard voices above him. He recognized them immediately, and It has to be the human, was saying. Everything started going wrong after he disappeared. He knows something. Then find him, replied. Search every corner of this station. Use whatever force necessary, but don't kill him. I want to know what he's done and who he's told. What about the prism? Prism is irrelevant. Focus on the human. Listened as they walked away. So they'd connected him to the problems. That was fine. In fact, it was perfect. Because while they were looking for him, they weren't watching their backs. He made his way to a cargo bay where he'd learned another shipment was arriving. This one contained 8, according to the manifests. He couldn't free them directly, too many guards, but he could do something else. He accessed the bay's control systems through a maintenance terminal. The station's gravity generators were delicate machines. Didn't know exactly how they worked, but he knew enough to be dangerous. He set a timer and then moved to a safe distance. When the gravity generator in that bay malfunctioned, causing a brief moment of zero gravity, the results were spectacular. Cargo went flying. The guards were thrown around, and in the confusion slipped in, opened the container and led them through the chaos to a prepared escape route. By the time security arrived, the bay was a mess, but they were safely hidden in the lower levels with the others. Had also left something behind, a message written in basic galactic script on the wall of the bay. You're being hunted. When saw that message, he smashed a cargo container in rage. The human wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting them. Returned to his base that night and found waiting for him. She'd received his message and traced his location. Seeing her face, another human, brought a wave of relief he hadn't expected. I've been broadcasting everything you sent me to nearby systems, she said. The Galactic Council is starting to pay attention, but they're bringing in mercenaries, warriors. They're serious about stopping you. Good, said, let them come. Looked at him with concern. Are trained killers, they're bred for combat, you can't fight them. I don't plan to fight them, I plan to hunt them. He pulled up a map of the station. I've been studying this place for months. I know every passage, every vent, every hiding spot. They are strong and fast, but they're predictable. Military training makes you predictable. And you're not. Human military taught me tactics, but humans have something that goes deeper than training. We have instinct, hunting instinct, and instinct doesn't follow rules. He marked several locations on the map. This is where I'll lead them, and this is where they'll learn that being the biggest predator means nothing when you're being hunted by something smarter. Looked at the map and then she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there when he first arrived on the station. Purpose, determination, and something that might have been dangerous. You've changed, she said quietly. They ignored me, replied. They treated me like I was nothing, like humans were nothing, so I became what they couldn't see, a ghost, a shadow, and now I'm the thing they fear most. Outside, in the corridors of Nexus 7, the hunt continued, and the prey was starting to realize they might not survive it. They arrived on Nexus 7 like a nightmare-given form. 6 of them, each standing 7 feet tall with armored exoskeletons and multiple blade-like limbs. They were known across the galaxy as the perfect soldiers, emotionless, efficient, and absolutely lethal. Watched them enter the station from a hidden camera feed Prism had given him access to. They moved with military precision, their heads turning to scan everything. Met them personally and could read this body language even through the screen. Relief, confidence, that would solve his problem. They're beautiful in a terrible way, Prism said, standing beside in their hidden base. I've never seen one defeated in combat. That's because people try to fight them, replied. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to make them hunt me in my territory. Over the past weeks, had transformed the lower levels of Nexus 7 into a maze of his own design. He'd sealed some passages and opened others. He'd placed sensors in key locations. He'd created traps using nothing but maintenance equipment and gravity manipulation. The station's forgotten spaces had become his hunting ground. They started their search in the lower cargo bays, watched their methodical approach through his camera network. They split into 3 teams of 2, covering more ground, professional, standard military tactics. Smiled, standard tactics made you predictable. He waited until the first team reached Bay 22, the area where he'd first discovered the traffic. Then he triggered his first trap. The bay's atmosphere controls suddenly pumped pure nitrogen into the sealed space. Most species would panic as oxygen levels dropped, but they didn't panic. They simply activated their emergency breathing apparatus and continued searching. What they didn't notice was the thin film of frozen condensation forming on the floor. Nitrogen that cold created ice on any surface. When one stepped on it, its blade-like foot slipped. Just for a second, just enough. The magnetic plates had hidden under the floor activated. They weren't strong enough to hold but they didn't need to be. They just needed to disrupt its balance for another second. They crashed into its partner and both went down. Before they could recover, sealed the bay remotely and vented all the nitrogen. Then he flooded it with a sleeping gas he'd synthesized from medical supplies. This breathing apparatus was designed for short-term emergencies, not prolonged exposure to hostile atmospheres. When they woke up hours later, they were locked in a storage container, alive but neutralized, 2 down, 4 to go. The remaining changed tactics. They stayed together, moved more carefully, and checked every space before entering. Good adaptation, but it wouldn't help them. Led them on a chase through the maintenance tunnels. He made noise, left traces, always staying just out of sight. They followed, weapons ready. They were hunting him, and they were confident they would catch him. They didn't understand that he was leading them exactly where he wanted them to go. The environmental control sector was a maze of pipes, generators, and machinery. Hot steam vented from pressure valves. Electrical conduits hummed with power. Warning signs in multiple languages warned of danger. Knew every inch of this place. They didn't. He triggered a steam valve release at precisely the right moment. Superheated steam filled the corridor where 2 were standing. Their armor protected them from the heat, but it also meant they couldn't see. Used that moment to activate an electromagnet he'd positioned above them. The powerful magnet pulled their metallic armor upward, just enough to throw off their balance. They stumbled into a maintenance pit, sealed it with a heavy grate. They could probably break out eventually, but it would take time, and time was something they didn't have. 4 down, 2 to go. The last 2 were the smart ones. They'd learned from their team's mistakes. They didn't chase. They didn't split up. They simply started destroying everything around them, cutting through walls, ripping apart machinery, making so much noise and chaos that had nowhere to hide. It was a good strategy. It almost worked. But had one more advantage. He knew what they were protecting. While they were tearing apart the lower levels, slipped past them using routes they didn't know existed. He made his way to the upper levels where the real targets waited. Sat in her administrative office, surrounded by security. She believed she was safe. They were handling the human problem. Soon, everything would return to normal. Then her door opened. Walked in covered in dust and grime, looking exhausted, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Behind him came a group had never expected to see. Prism, carrying engineering equipment. A young named who worked in the docks and had lost his sister to traffickers, and dozens of freed. "Hello, Administrator," said calmly. "We need to talk." Security guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Prism activated a device. Every weapon in the room died, their power cells drained by an electromagnetic pulse. "You see," continued, "while you were hunting me, I was building something else. A resistance, people you ignored, people you considered worthless, and we've been very busy." His voice came through the room's communication system. This conversation is being broadcast live to every terminal on the station and to 3 nearby systems. The Galactic Council is watching. Hello, Administrator. His crystalline face showed no emotion, but her lights flickered with distress. You have no proof of anything. Actually, I have everything. Pulled out a data chip. Financial records, communication logs, testimonies from Freed, and my personal favorite, security footage of you meeting with buyers. Where did you? You thought I was just a cargo worker, someone to ignore, but I was a military logistics officer on Earth. I know how to track supply chains. I know how to find evidence. And I've spent every day since arriving here documenting your crimes. At that moment, the last two burst into the office. They saw and raised their weapons, but they stopped when they realized they were being recorded. Killing an unarmed person on live broadcast would create problems even they couldn't handle. Your operation is over, said two. The Council knows everything. Ships are already on their way to shut down your entire network across multiple stations. One human, said bitterly. One insignificant human destroyed everything. That's where you're wrong, replied. It wasn't just me, it was everyone you ignored, every person you considered worthless. We all stopped you together. Tried to run. He made it 3 steps before tackled him. The young had been waiting for this moment for months. Tried to fight his way out, but Prism sealed the doors remotely. There was nowhere to go. When the Galactic Council's enforcement ships arrived 6 hours later, they found the entire trafficking leadership detained and guarded by a coalition of former victims and station workers who had joined resistance. The evidence was so overwhelming that the council representatives could barely believe one person had gathered it all. But it wasn't one person. It was a movement that had grown in the shadows, led by someone everyone had dismissed as irrelevant. Stood in the cargo bay where this had all started, watching council officers take away in restraints. Stood beside him, along with Prism, and the eldest of the they'd first rescued. What happens now? Asked. Now, looked around at the station that had once ignored him. Now we make sure this never happens again. A council representative approached them. She was a tall being from a species didn't recognize. You must be, I'm investigator. I've been reviewing your evidence. It's impressive, disturbing but impressive. Thank you. The council would like to offer you a position. We need people with your skills, your determination, she paused, searching for the word, your uniquely human perspective. What kind of position? Officially, you'd be a special investigator. Unofficially, you'd hunt traffickers and slavers across the galaxy. You'd have authority and resources, and you'd never be ignored again. Looked at, she nodded. They both knew what his answer would be. I accept, but I have conditions. I want a team, these people. He gestured to Prism and the others, and I want full authority to pursue these cases wherever they lead. Smiled, which on her face was a strange expression. The council predicted you might say that. They've already approved it. Welcome to the Galactic Justice Initiative, investigator. As walked away to handle other matters, laughed. From ignored cargo worker to galactic investigator, that's quite a journey. The journey's not over, said quietly. What we found here was just one station, one network. How many others are out there? How many more people are suffering? Then we'll find them, Prism said, and we'll stop them together. Nodded. The lonely human who had arrived at Nexus 7 didn't exist anymore. He'd become something else. A hunter, a protector, and a symbol of something the galaxy had forgotten. Never underestimate someone just because they seem weak. Never ignore someone just because they're different. Because sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. And once they start hunting, they never stop. Not until justice is served. 3 months after the fall of the Nexus 7 trafficking network, stood in a conference room on the Galactic Council's central station. Around him sat representatives from 40 different species, all listening to his report. Every seat was filled. Nobody was ignoring him now. The Nexus 7 operation led us to 17 other stations, explained, displaying data on the holographic screen. We've shut down 12 so far. Over 300 victims have been freed and returned to their home worlds. We've arrested 83 individuals involved in the network. A council member, a being covered in flowing tendrils, spoke up. This is remarkable work, investigator, but we're concerned about your methods. Some have complained that your team operates with too much aggression. Met the council member's eyes calmly. When I first came to Nexus 7, I tried to do things the proper way. I reported concerns through official channels. I followed procedures, and I was ignored. The victims continued to suffer while bureaucracy moved slowly. So yes, my team operates aggressively, because every day we waste is another day someone suffers. There was silence in the room. Then another council member, one from the species, stood, recognized him as Counselor Vex, one of the highest-ranking officials. The human makes a valid point, Vex said. We allowed this to happen because we were comfortable. We didn't want to see what was happening in our forgotten corners. Perhaps we needed someone who wasn't comfortable, someone who wouldn't ignore problems just because they were inconvenient. The meeting continued for another hour, but the outcome was clear. The Galactic Justice Initiative was officially approved and funded. His team would continue their work with full council support. After the meeting, returned to his new quarters on the station. They were much nicer than his first room on Nexus 7. Spacious, comfortable, with a real window overlooking the stars. He'd been offered even better accommodations, but he'd refused. He didn't want to get too comfortable. Comfort made you soft, made you miss things. Was waiting for him, reviewing files on her data pad. We got a new lead, a mining operation in the frontier zones. Workers are disappearing. What species? Multiple, but mostly smaller ones. Delicate species that can access narrow mining tunnels. Felt the familiar anger rise in his chest. More exploitation, more people treating others as disposable. Gather the team, we leave tomorrow. His team had grown since Nexus 7. Prism still served as their technical expert, his engineering knowledge invaluable. Had become their field coordinator, using his knowledge of cargo operations to track suspicious shipments. The Elder, whose name was Whisper, now worked as their liaison to victim species, helping freed people adjust and testify. They'd also added others. A former mercenary who'd realized she was working for criminals. A young lawyer who believed in justice over profit. Even one of the who had hunted, it had been so impressed by his tactics that it requested to join his team. The next morning, gathered them all in their ship's briefing room. The ship was called the Persistence, named by, had approved the name immediately. The mining operation is owned by a corporation called Frontier Resources, began, displaying information. They operate in lawless territories where council regulations don't reach. Workers sign contracts promising good pay, but once they arrive, they can't leave. Classic debt slavery. How many workers? Prism asked. At least 200, possibly more. And security. Heavy, private military contractors. They're prepared for raids. Leaned forward, so what's the plan? Smiled, we don't raid, we infiltrate. I'm going in as a worker. Absolutely not, said immediately. It's too dangerous. It's the only way to get real evidence and find out where all the workers are kept. Besides, I have experience with being underestimated. Looked around the room. They'll see a human and think I'm weak, disposable. They won't watch me carefully, and that's when we strike. The plan was risky, but the team had learned to trust instincts. 2 days later, he arrived at the mining operation with forged documents, posing as a desperate worker looking for any job. The facility manager barely glanced at him. You're small, good for the narrow tunnels. You'll work 16-hour shifts. Payment is deferred until your contract is complete. Sign here." Signed with a fake name and was assigned to a barracks with 50 other workers. The conditions were terrible: minimal food, dirty water, sleeping on thin mats in a crowded room. The workers were from a dozen different species, all looking exhausted and hopeless. That first night, listened to their stories. They'd all been promised good wages and fair treatment. Instead, they were trapped, working until they collapsed, with their debts always increasing. "Why don't you leave?" asked a worker named a small reptilian being. "Where would we go? We're 3 days from the nearest station, no money for transport, and the guards shoot anyone who tries to escape." Eyes were dull with defeat. "We'll die here, most of us know it." "What if someone freed you? What if help came?" Laughed bitterly. "Help doesn't come to places like this. Nobody cares about workers in the frontier zones. We're invisible." Understood that feeling. He'd been invisible once too. Over the next week, he worked in the mines during the day and planned during the night. He mapped the facility, noting guard patterns and security weaknesses. He identified the workers who still had fight left in them, and he sent encrypted reports back to his team. The facility's biggest vulnerability was its remote location. They relied on supply ships that came every 10 days. The next ship was due in 3 days. On the night before the supply ship arrived, gathered a small group of workers he'd come to trust. "Tomorrow, we're leaving, all of us." "That's impossible," said the guards. "We'll be distracted. My team is coming, but I need your help. Can you spread the word? Tell everyone to be ready to move when they hear alarms." "You're serious?" "I've done this before, trust me." The next day, the supply ship arrived right on schedule. What the facility didn't know was that team had intercepted it hours earlier. The ship that docked was still the same ship, but with a very different crew. When the cargo doors opened, instead of supplies, armed members of the Galactic Justice Initiative poured out. At the same time, triggered a series of power failures he'd been preparing all week. The facility went dark. In the chaos, led the workers out through routes he'd mapped. The guards tried to respond, but they were facing professional operators who knew exactly what they were doing. The former mercenary on's team faced down the entire security force, and they wisely chose to surrender. By the time backup could arrive from the corporation's main office, it was too late. All 243 workers were safely on council ships. The facility managers were in custody and had enough evidence to prosecute everyone involved. The lawyer on's team, a young named Crystal, handled the legal proceedings. The workers, the evidence was overwhelming. Frontier Resources was shut down, its executives were arrested, and new laws were passed to protect workers in frontier territories. Found before the workers were transported home. "You saved us. Why? You could have just reported this and let someone else handle it." "Because I know what it's like to be ignored," said. "To be treated like you don't matter. Nobody should feel that way. What you did, it's changing things. People are talking about humans differently now. They say you're dangerous." "Good, let them think that. Maybe they'll think twice before exploiting someone." Back on the Persistence, showed a news report. The galaxy's media was covering the Frontier Resources case extensively, but more than that, they were talking about humans, about their persistence, their refusal to quit, their ability to hunt down injustice wherever it hid. "You're becoming famous," said. "Some people are calling you a hero, others say you're dangerous." "I don't care what they call me. I care about results." The council wants to expand the initiative. They want to recruit more humans. They think human psychology is perfect for this kind of work. Nodded slowly. "We do have certain advantages. We evolved as hunters. We understand persistence. We don't give up easily, and we're good at tracking patterns." "It's more than that," Prism said, entering the room. "You showed the galaxy something they'd forgotten. That being physically weak doesn't mean being powerless. That being small doesn't mean being insignificant. Over the following months, the Galactic Justice Initiative grew. More humans joined, along with volunteers from dozens of species. They shut down trafficking networks, freed exploited workers, and brought criminals to justice across the galaxy. Nexus 7 became a symbol of change. Under Prism's administration, it transformed into a model station where all species were treated equally. They established an embassy there, their first in galactic space. Young was promoted to station security chief, ensuring that what happened before would never happen again. A year after arriving on Nexus 7 as an ignored cargo worker, stood on the observation deck of the Persistence, watching stars stream past as they traveled to their next mission. Joined him, 2 cups of Earth coffee in her hands. "Do you ever think about going home?" she asked. "Back to Earth?" "Sometimes, but this is the work I'm meant to do. Out here, we're proving something important." "What's that?" "That humanity belongs in the galaxy. Not because we're the strongest or the fastest, but because we don't quit. Because we see people who are suffering and we do something about it. Because when everyone else looks away, we keep starring until we find the truth." Smiled. The lone human was ignored until he became the hunter. "I was never alone. I just had to find the others who were being ignored too. Together, we became something they couldn't dismiss." Below them, in the crew quarters, the team was preparing for their next mission. Reports of suspicious activity on a remote research station. Workers who hadn't been heard from in weeks. It was the kind of case that most authorities would put on a low priority list. But Nott's team. They never put victims on low priority. They never ignored suffering just because it was inconvenient or difficult. Because that's what humans did. They hunted, they persisted, and they never ever stopped until justice was served. In the dark spaces between stars, in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, predators of a different kind were learning to fear. Not the ones with claws or teeth or armor, but the ones with determination, intelligence, and a refusal to look away. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Finished his coffee and turned from the window. There was work to do, people to save, criminals to catch, and a galaxy that finally understood a simple truth. Never ignore a human, because once they start hunting, they never stop. And that was exactly how it should be.